Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick minute to talk briefly about my hand sanding process and some of the sanding blocks that I use. Have a couple people have asked me about what I'm using and why in different scenarios. This is by no means an in-depth dive into my hand sanding process. Maybe I'll make one of those videos at some point, but I just want to show you that what I use when I'm delving into the hand sanding process, which I consider to be one of the most grueling parts of the build. Some people like it, they kind of zone out and meditate. I'm not one of those people. As soon as I start, I can't wait to be finished. And I go through a lot of sandpaper, a lot of sore muscles and cramps in my hands, and I just find it tedious and arduous. But anyway, from left to right, this is pretty much the most simple. I just put a piece of adhesive sandpaper. I buy these in rolls from Amazon. This is Dura brand, Dura Gold, excuse me. You can find that on Amazon pretty cheap and have all different grits. And it sticks pretty well as long as you don't spray a bunch of WD-40 on what you're using and it gets seeped into the cracks between the paper and whatever the surface of the sanding block. But this is good if you're using if you're sanding flats, especially if you have a lot of surface area that's flat, like a chef's knife, and you're just trying to get as much coverage as you possibly can with as little amount of effort. It's not going to be great for going into corners, and really not good for if you have a lot of topical changes or a dramatic drop off from your flats to your bevels. But this is a good basic sanding block, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This is still a flat sanding block, but I've got this little rubber pad on here. And whenever you go to a softer sanding block, something like this or something flexible like these, which I'll talk about in a minute, when you're going from soft to something softer as opposed to steel or hardwood, it's because you might be finding yourself chasing little divots or hills and valleys, and you can chase those things for the longest time, because when you're hand sanding, what you're really doing is bringing all the high spots down to the lowest possible spot. So wherever your deepest little valley is on your bevels or on your flats, if you want it to all look uniform, you've got to bring the entire rest of the blade down to that point, level to that spot. You're not actually sanding the hole itself, you're sanding everything around the hole until it's level with the hole. So, if you really wanted to go the most surefire way to do that, you use a solid flat sanding block of some kind, and that will bring everything down uniform to the lowest point, so it will all match. But as you get close to that point and you get tired chasing little hills and valleys and trying to get everything leveled out, you can use something a little bit softer, and that's where that little rubber pad comes into play. And it will blend a little bit. And to the naked eye, you usually won't see the little imperfections. So if you're not trying to be absolutely perfect and you still want it to look good, this is kind of a shortcut. Just go with something a little softer, or something with a pad on it to kind of work around that. And I do it all the time. So call it a corner cutting or whatever if you want. I think my knives look pretty good and the bevels look pretty clean when I get them to where I want them to be. This next pair is something cool I thought was pretty cool I came up with. I've got a 14-inch wheel attachment on my belt sander, and that's what I like to use for most of my hollow grinds. So I end up with a little bit of a grind that's consistent with that 14-inch diameter wheel. And if you're doing something, I did a sword not too long ago, and that's where I came up with this idea. And that sword was, 26 inches long. It's a short sword. And so I've got 4 bevels to sand, because it's a double edge, obviously. And you've got, an edge on this side, an edge on this side, 2 bevels going up the length of it on this side, and then when you flip it over, 2 bevels going along the length as well there. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of hand sanding. So what I did is I took a piece of metal and I traced the edge of my 14-inch wheel onto that piece of metal, and then I cut it out and I sanded it and polished it and got as closely matched as I possibly could to the radius on that 14-inch wheel. And it came out, it's a pretty perfect match. I could grab the wheel and show you, but you'll just have to take my word for it. And now what I can do is take a piece of sandpaper and stick it on there, and I can sand vertically all along the length of the blade, or I guess that's horizontally technically, but I can go all the way up and down the length of the blade and set this right in the cavity of the bevels, and it'll give me a really sharp, clean finish on my long bevels. And this is basically the same principle. It's just a little bit softer. So if you're trying to, and I can actually put a little bit of a pad on. I've got rubber pads that I can put on here too. So if I want to make it a little bit softer and I don't want to go through the whole process of trying to get everything absolutely, like up to precise tolerances, I can put a pad on this and it'll achieve pretty much the same effect. This is my go-to when I'm sanding any flats, whether it's a flat bevel or the flat before it dives into the bevel. Again, just a little piece of adhesive sandpaper. I usually start it right around 120 grit because when I'm done grinding my bevels on my grinder, I usually am finished at about 80 grit. So then I pop up to 120 and I usually work my way up to, I don't know, 400, 800, 1,000, even 1,500, depending on what I want it to look like and how far I want to go with it. This is my go-to. It's just a block of 3/16. I've just rounded the edges a little bit so it's comfortable in my hand. It actually feels pretty good, and I can go to town with this thing and really get good leverage on it, and that's probably the one I use most. This was really a cool discovery. I just decided to try this one day. These are just little tongue depressors, and when I'm getting close to the end, this is what I usually end up using in my bevels. It's flexible, so it'll allow me to do hollow grinds, and it'll flat surface grind, or excuse me, it'll flat finish as well. It's got a really narrow profile on and a tight edge there, so you can get right into your plunge lines with this and really smooth those out. So this is usually what I finish my bevels with. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, nothing too mysterious, but I thought you might like to know how I go about it. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments field below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.